Name the issue: water, air quality, transportation, housing, economic development, law enforcement. OC Supervisor Shawn Nelson has a seat at the table, and often he has the gavel. He's the current longest-running supervisor in office since 2010, and before that he was on the Fullerton City Council, 2 terms as the city's mayor. Who better to ask about the county's big issues and the infighting among supervisors? Shawn Nelson is coming up right now on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by 5 Point. 5 Point is an independent real estate development company with assets under management across California. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Memorial Care is transforming the way healthcare is delivered, keeping our communities and businesses healthy by guiding them on the path to wellness with easily accessible hospitals, physician offices, and outpatient centers. Memorial Care, leading the way.
It's interesting how those things work.
Yeah, a little bit.
Hi, I'm Reiff. Welcome to Inside OC, and I'm talking with Orange County Supervisor Shawn Nelson. So, Shawn, welcome back. This is the second time you have been on Inside OC. The first time was 5.5 years ago. At that time, you were the new kid on the block. You were the new supervisor with some big ideas and ruffling some feathers, and now here you are, winding down your second term. You'll be term limited out in 2018. So let me ask you that's things have changed. Is the county better off or worse off than it was 5.5 years ago?
Yeah, I think the county is better off from a structure standpoint. I think that's why generally it's fairly quiet. I mean, for reporters and people in your industry, there isn't a lot of big mushroom clouds on the horizon. A lot of it is not substantive, if it is anymore. It's probably more just personality driven. But I think the culture of the county it's just gotten focused on business, trying to position our assets for the long term, trying to really manage a budget that I think over the first couple of years, with a lot of help from my colleagues, we managed our realistic expectations, got through the down times, and we built a good bench.
I'm not sure everybody would agree that the Board of Supervisors is better now than it was then. I remember when you first came on, there was you, there was Pat Bates, there was John Morlock. It seemed like the board was tackling tough issues. The most obvious one is the pensions. Tough negotiations with the unions. This last time, you guys just approved this sheriff's deputies get an 8.8% raise. It's kind of hush-hush, and it just seems like, let's just, get this off the table and not really worry about this continually growing unfunded pension liability.
Well, the unfunded liability remains a major issue. And when I got here, we were at the tip of the spear dealing with all of the unfunded issues, the pension spiking. But now you've got PEPRA, which the governor
what's
signed.
PEPRA?
PEPRA was the governor's version of sort of, fixing the pension system.
Right.
It's not what you would have probably had my prior board do, were we king, but when it's implemented statewide, that's going to be the rule. What it did is it raised the age and lowered the pension formula.
And the LA Times just had an article on how it was well-intentioned and it helped a little bit, but not nearly enough, and that the problem's worse now than when this PEPRA, went into effect.
No question. For all the reasons that probably swept me into office originally, the math is bad. The funds are not performing the way they were expected. So, from the standpoint of the board, that was our hot issue. What people wouldn't know is Orange County right now, for the general employees, has the lowest pension formula in the state. We have a formula lower than PEPRA. The unique circumstance that we had a lower formula available at the time, so we could pick. If we had a lower one, we did. And our employees pay more than any employees I'm aware of in the entire state. Our average employees pay 18 to 20%. Most cities and counties,
no question, and that's
they pay
because
under 10.
of what those past boards that you were on did. And so that's why that's the case. But when I see, you know, when you read about this and unlike the transparency that the board was moving toward, it's all kind of done in the back room. And I mean, did this deal with the sheriff deputies that go in help the pension situation?
Did it help it? No. No raise is going to help the situation. It because of the circumstances we're in, it's not really making our current situation any worse. When you look at the deputies, there's more transparency now than there would have been prior to those earlier boards because of some of the things that were done. There's no coin ordinance, but many of the items that were in it for disclosure and making sure the public is aware are still followed. We lost a court battle that we're on appeal on, so we can't implement all of them. But you know, we're in a situation, you had people with no raises since prior to the recession and paying more out of their pocket than any other employee union in law enforcement. And we were in a predicament because we've got more and more retirements. And one of our realities is that if we're not competitive, even with our local cities, we're not going to keep all the younger people, and it just that starts spinning out of control as well. It's a frustrating situation to be in for sure.
Okay, let's move on to another problem which has gotten a lot of headlines lately, and that's the homelessness situation, particularly around the Civic Center, where you and the rest of the county officials do their business. People go there, and it seems like it's a tragedy on so many counts. You've got these people and the homeless people in this terrible situation. And anybody that works there, anybody who's going there for a marriage license or whatever, is encountering this whole city of homeless people. What's happening?
Well, a couple of things, and you're right. The situation is getting worse, not just in Orange County, everywhere, which is an excuse. We certainly are taking it head on. We have opened an emergency shelter in the Civic Center, which is essentially the Vatican for county government. I mean, that's where all the business is done. So we opened a 24-hour shelter across the street in what used to be the OCTA bus terminal. We have implemented an executive level position really to just focus on this issue, and then contracted with not only a provider to work with just providing services there, but also a coordinator in the Civic Center to do outreach for the people just there. And Rick, unfortunately for all of us, the problem's a lot bigger in the Civic Center as well. I think the Civic Center, we've got a plan finally that's making a big dent, and it's all been within the last 30 days. What concerns me and a lot of other people are the flood control channels and some of the other things which are next on the list, but they're clearly out of control as well.
Give me some rough numbers. How big is the problem? How many homeless people on a given day are there at the center, and will this new shelter, accommodate all of them, or what are the numbers here?
So the downtown Civic Center is a few hundred people. The overall county is probably more along the lines of 35 to 4,000, 3,500. So on the last count. So the Civic Center stuff is really just dealing with the people in the Civic Center. And one of the things we're trying to manage, for example, is a lot of well-intentioned churches, one of which I attend. The idea, if you're going to help the homeless, is, well, we're going to go down to the Civic Center and distribute food. And what we found is that although that seems like maybe a good idea, by the time you get the trash and the people spreading the food around, one of the things this new shelter is going to do is organize all things homeless, including when the feedings are. If you want to volunteer, you're welcome to, but you've got to do it on a schedule at the center. Trash can't be all over. It's got to be just a little more organized.
It seems homelessness is a bigger problem now than it was years ago. Right. It's getting worse. Why is that?
I wish I knew, and I've heard that a lot of people speculate that it's, some of the internal California propositions that have let criminals out early and things. I don't discount that might be some small part of it, but Rick, I read articles every week that Denver has a population out of control. Cities all over the country, Phoenix is struggling with it, and I send them to my staff because clearly something in this country is happening, that homelessness is spinning out of control. And I wish I could tell you. I don't know if it's the overall job situation, it's just lingering effects from the recession, if it's housing costs are just getting too out of control for the lower end, but clearly something's changing.
I think some of the numbers suggest a third of the homeless people are have mental problems of one kind or another. Are we treating that differently than we used to? We used to institutionalize people. Now we just let them go on the street?
Yeah, and the institutional stuff kind of predates me. I mean, that probably goes back to, my childhood days, and at 50.
Predates me.
Right, yeah, roger that. I don't think that has changed so much, but clearly our methodology of dealing with mentally ill, it's just a big part of the cocktail that gets us to a solution. Orange County has a really innovative court just for homeless people, and I know they've touted their successes, and they've had a lot of them, but it's not making the problem go away. And the county is really tasked with limited resources, but it is our task to try and get our arms around this and find a solution for people.
Yeah, let's talk about a couple other things. You are a true blue Fullerton guy. I mean, do you still live like where you grew up, or what?
I live in a home one of my best friends grew up in, so not far from the scene of the crime.
Yeah. So on the other hand, there's Irvine. And I'm not suggesting you don't like Irvine, but it seems like there have been a few tussles with Irvine, whether it's over this proposed development of county land at the Great Park, whether it's the Orange County Fire Authority and the issues it's been going through with Irvine, or whether it's you and Todd Spitzer, the supervisor from Irvine, tangling from time to time. So can you declare on this show that you do not dislike Irvine?
I can guarantee you I do not dislike Irvine, and perhaps I don't know, maybe Irvine ought to call me for advice first before stepping into uncharted waters. But it's not time to gloat. I mean, what's happened in a couple of these instances is that what they found out is they tried to do real aggressive things for the benefit of Irvine, not necessarily the benefit of all. And I represent the 3.1 million people that live in Orange County, including Irvine. But we can't work to the detriment of everybody to sort of, stuff the feather nest of the city of Irvine. And in both of those instances, in the fire authority's case, what Irvine decided on their own was they looked at the amount of cash that went through Irvine, not from Irvine, there's a big difference, into the fire authority, and felt that they had overpaid. The problem is Irvine doesn't pay property taxes. Never has. I mean, the property owners pay property taxes, and all property owners, whether they're in Irvine or Santa Fe Springs for that matter, everyone pays 1%. You have your utility districts and stuff that changes it, so everyone pays the same amount. What they had not calculated is back when the fire authority was created in the early 90s, the county, not Irvine, had apparently overestimated, in some cases, the cost. And if there was a bad calculation, that may be, but the money was the county's originally.
So what you're talking about is this issue that Irvine had actually negotiated with the fire authority to get a refund, right? What was it, like $140 million or something like that?
It was tens of millions a year. And you can't get a refund.
So the fire authority was going to send this money to Irvine, kind of like, yeah, you guys have overpaid, and you stepped in.
Right, there was one guy in the world that knew that wasn't legally appropriate.
And it went to court, you scotched the deal, and you recently got a favorable ruling?
Right,
or what?
The appellate court, they didn't like the trial court's ruling. The appellate court, once you understood the issue, and it is complex, it's actually pretty basic.
The fire authority has some problems. They've got, again, going back to pensions, they've got this unfunded liability. And Irvine is threatening, maybe what you're saying is right, but Irvine's saying that they may pull out and start their own department, and that's going to be bad news for the fire authority.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. First and foremost, the fire authority probably would have some problems if Irvine pulled out, funding-wise. But I'm not sure how the fire authority would be better off under those circumstances refunding tens of millions of dollars every year to Irvine. That's not going to make a bad situation better. It'd make it worse. Irvine may very well want to pull out, but in Irvine's arguments in the very lawsuit with the county as to how much it would cost them to provide fire service, one of their arguments was there's a surplus. Well, unfortunately for them, what they proved was how much it would actually cost them to provide fire service. And if we ever rejiggered this formula, the one thing that would matter to the county is how much it would cost, not how much you'd like.
So what do you think?
So they're not going to get any money. They're not going to get any surplus anyways.
What's going to happen with the fire authority?
I think the fire authority is going to purr along. I suspect Irvine would find that if they wanted to remove themselves, they have all kinds of contractual requirements to hire the very same people. They don't own fire stations currently. When they got all done with it, what they'd find is they're no better off than they are now.
Okay.
There's no way to run a money laundering scheme through the fire authority that benefits the general fund of Irvine. That's essentially what was attempted. It was completely inappropriate from the word go.
So I can see why you and Todd maybe have some friction from time to time, because of course Todd Spitzer was, favored that deal.
Well, the problem is I was right. So, I can ask for forgiveness for being correct, but I try to mind my P's and Q's. I was right. It was fairly obvious, and the scheme was a little nefarious.
Right.
So forgive me for looking out for the rest of the 3 million people that live here, but it was necessary.
So are you right about the Great Park and that issue? I mean, just briefly, why don't you explain? It's like 10 acres that the county owns right next to the Great Park.
Yeah, the old Toro Marine Corps Air Station, everyone's familiar with sort of that epic battle about whether it would be an airport. It isn't. The city of Irvine annexed 3,700 acres or better, and in the middle of all that transaction 20 years ago-ish, the county ended up with a whopping 100 acres. And if you've ever heard the term, the tail wagging the dog, what's essentially being suggested is if the county wants to build anything there, that we're going to jam up everyone's plans for this 3,700 acre development. That's
Well,
not
of course, 37.
correct.
A lot of it's park. I mean, a lot of 3,700.
Well, not that much of it's
but
park,
It's relevant.
but-
I said 10 acres. Thank you for adding a
It's
zero
100.
to it. It's 100 acres. I think, as you know, even though the county has, according to the agreement, the right to do essentially whatever they can develop what they want. The understanding was it was going to be like some kind of a park or institutional purpose, maybe a museum or something like that. It was never intended. And then what you're doing by suggesting some dense development there is you're throwing the whole Great Park plan a kilter.
That is ridiculous. It's not possible. And Rick, I assure you that the attorneys that were involved in making this deal, with very little effort, could have clarified if the intention was really to narrow down the use. It's very easy to narrow that down. But it's awful convenient for people that have no evidence of this, mind you. Oh, there was an agreement to do something else. Look, one thing I can guarantee you is if the county were to hope for, on the behalf of all the people that own that property, because it's everyone's property, if we were to hope that our adjacent neighbors, the commercial developers, were given the opportunity to take all of our development rights and use them for themselves, my guess is they would. But if the reverse is on us, that is not correct.
Yeah.
We will negotiate in good faith with everyone. The problem that you've had, and the reason it's been a dust-up, is no one wants us to exert any rights. They want to trample on you, me, and everyone else that lives in the county, and essentially assert that we will leave you with land worth nothing.
Okay.
And that's not a fair deal for the people.
Well, now, full disclosure, 5 Point Communities, the private developer of the Great Park, is a sponsor of this show.
Sure.
But that's full disclosure. But in a way, is this, you said before you represent, the 3 million residents of, or 3.1 million
Sure.
residents
Including 5 Points.
of Orange County, including 5 Point, the city of Irvine. And the city of Irvine is saying, look, this isn't the way we want it. Why doesn't the county play along? I mean, you make decisions all the time that maybe you're passing up an economic benefit because this area, whether it's a homeless shelter these people need or a marina these people need, that you say, all right, why don't you play along? Why are you guys hardballing it like this?
We're not. I mean, that's the fallacy here. We're not hardballing it. You've got people that want to hardball us, frustrated that we're even a participant. We haven't hardballed anyone.
So you're saying it's negotiable?
I'm saying we have to protect our rights so that we can sit down and, in true county fashion, forget reaching a reasonable compromise. We'll probably reach an unreasonable compromise that favors the other side. What they would like is for us to have no ability to negotiate at all. That's not fair by anyone's definition. And the few council members that I've been able to talk to directly and explain what is and isn't going on, every one of them universally have said, okay, I get it now. I understand. So the taglines that you're hearing about this is unfair, that's a spin job by somebody who wants all that we have and some of what they have.
Okay.
That's what's going on here. No more, but no less than that.
Okay, we've talked a lot about policy. Hopefully we'll get back to it, but let's talk personalities, because everybody loves that. And as you know, there have been some dust-ups between you and Supervisor Todd Spitzer. Todd Spitzer is also clashes a lot with the district attorney, Tony Rackauckus. And, you know, you proposed a change in the term limits thing. It got very personal. Todd then accused you of being a double dipper, you know, all that on pensions, on your pension and all that. Oh, you know, is this any way to run a county?
Well, yeah, I mean, the double dipper thing, it wasn't about pensions. He was upset that I get an AQMD vehicle, which everyone on that board gets, and I have to pay for it, but he kind of missed that point. Look, I try to move policy forward and have since I got here, and I've had tremendous wins, most of which it's not my instinct to call the press or start writing an op-ed. I came here to get stuff done. I gave up a lot to be here. That's my issue. But I wanted to accomplish things, not tout how great an accomplishment I've made whenever I get these milestones. You know, Todd has to answer up for himself. I don't really understand the term limit issue. I've watched around the state, Rick, and the agencies that don't have term limits have found that they are better off if they have them. Many have used 8-year term limits. They've generally gone back to 12 and stuck with it. The state started with a goofy formula of 8 in one and 6 in another, and they've gone to a 12-year lifetime. And on my way out, as Morlock had proposed prior, he'd asked me if I would revisit this. I agree with him. I think county supervisors should probably serve a 12-year lifetime limit rather than what we currently have. Currently, you can serve 8, but then if you get off, you can come back. Mm-hmm. And the kind of the goofy boomerang is the way our political system works is if you leave the Board of Supervisors and go to the state, people think of you still as an incumbent. You have an incredible advantage. I have colleagues who served 8 and left, and in my perception, I just think we'd be better off if they stuck around, used their tenure, worked at the county. But it's not a hill I want to die on. I thought it was a good idea.
Well, now you could come back in a few years and run again, right?
Right, but I don't have any interest in doing that, and I came here to serve, and I hope I have. But this was, my idea was really to just, I've lived it. I have, I can test the waters. I sense where the breeze is going. I think there's a better way to do this. It's okay if I'm wrong. I mean, it's not personal to someone. I think one of my colleagues took it personal. And it was, if you view yourself in a manner that everything's personal, you're probably going to take it personal. But it certainly wasn't meant that way.
Okay, so we mentioned it, 2018, you're termed out. What are your plans?
I had always thought that I would run for judge before I ever was a county supervisor. I was a litigator for a career, maybe in many people's opinion, perhaps better suited for that job than this role. But that was my intention when I ran for this originally. I wanted to serve my 8 and move on, and that's still my plan.
So you're going to run for the court, Superior Court?
Right. And if I'm fortunate enough to have an opportunity to run, there's not always a seat. And if I'm fortunate enough to win, the swearing in would be in January of 19. So that's a few years from now still.
What concerns you most about the county?
The thing that concerns me the most about the county that gets no play from our state electeds, because I understand how frustrating it is, but going back to the era of Prop 13 and all the good that it created, it did create some unique circumstances. And one of them is that the county of Orange, out of all 58 counties in the state, gets the least returned from our property taxes. And the delta would be about $600 million in our general fund. And not to get too into the weeds, but the general fund is the unrestricted money. We have a $6 billion budget, but most of that money comes in blocks and it goes right out to the predetermined areas that we have to spend it. So general fund money is rare. And in order to claw that back, there's some ideas that we've had. We've tried to work with employee unions, but clearly the state doesn't want to share any more money with us. I think it's a difficult ask, and I would love to see our state representatives, Republican and Democrat, join together and try and leverage some benefit there. But that would make the biggest difference.
Everybody talks about that, and it's never going to happen, right?
It is our biggest issue, though. We are not as large as Los Angeles, but other than LA, we send the largest bag of gold up to Sacramento and we get the least back. So even if we got the average back, which would be 17 cents on the dollar, we get 6, we'd still be a donor county.
Okay.
We just, if you got the average and you send more than average, you're still doing the world a favor. That is our biggest challenge. What people don't understand because they're busy living their lives is Orange County's business model has always been and will have to be pinching every penny to get public-private partnerships to do things that in a lot of places the government would just do on its own.
Yeah, but it's a great place to live, right?
It's impossible to beat, and whether you call it a weather tax or whatever it is, we certainly have our problems, but our benefits far outweigh the problems.
Fantastic. Well, Shawn, thanks for coming on. It was good the first time, good the second time.
Always a pleasure.
All right.
Thanks
well,
for
that's
having
it for
me.
now. And thanks again to my guest, Supervisor Shawn Nelson. You can watch this show and past shows by going to pbssocal.org or rickreiff.com. You can also catch our shows and our post-show open mic chatter on YouTube. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by 5 Point. 5 Point is an independent real estate development company with assets under management across California. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Memorial Care is transforming the way healthcare is delivered, keeping our communities and businesses healthy by guiding them on the path to wellness with easily accessible hospitals, physician offices, and outpatient centers. Memorial Care, leading the way.